discuss the state of the economy. Joining us now is the Principal Economic Advisor, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, in conversation with us at ET Now. So thank you very much for taking your time out and speaking with us today. This is Ruchi, Bhatia. Let me first begin by asking you about the second wave of COVID-19. While the cases seem to be on a decline, the risks of the mutant strain still continue. What is your assessment in terms of where we are so far? Because at the beginning of this month, high frequency indicators do show that things are pointing in two different directions. Various indicators are showing that we're close to normalcy, while many others show that there's a long way to go. What is your assessment in terms of where we stand at this moment?
Well, I mean, we did go through a very difficult and disruptive second wave. So not surprisingly, many of the indicators did get thrown off. So now that we are back in an environment where cases have come down, we are able to open up the economy. But the exact trajectory that the economy will take from here, we need to watch that closely, because I think rather than having a preconceived notion about exactly how things will pan out, I think it would be better to watch how indicators behave once things are opened up properly. What I will say, however, is that unlike the first lockdown, the impact of the second lockdown on many indicators is perhaps muted. We can see that exports are doing reasonably well. Foreign direct investment is doing well. There are many sectors that didn't get closed down completely, unlike in the first round. So overall, there is still some momentum in the economy. But of course, not surprisingly, there are services sectors, for example, which you can see from the PMI number as well, that have been hurt. Particularly things like, contact services, like hotels and so on. So I think, we will need to watch this for a little while before we have a clear sense of what the momentum in the economy is, before we can take a call on what should be the response. Meanwhile, I would argue we should focus on the following thing. First of all, people seem to have now suddenly forgotten that we had presented a fairly expansionary budget back in February. And most people would have agreed that most of the measures announced there were good measures, and we still need to make sure we implement that and get that going. We need to also similarly make sure the vaccination program continues to be rolled out aggressively. You will have seen that the numbers of the people being vaccinated every day have dramatically gone up. So that is necessary because, unless you keep the system open, there's no point in doing stimulus and so on. So that is our focus, which is one, make sure that vaccination gets rolled out. Two, make sure that the announcements of the budget and of course of the previous packages get fully done out. And then while we wait over the next 5 weeks or so to see how exactly things pan out after the lockdown has been fully unwound. So then we will be able to provide you a sense of what our responses will be, because obviously our responses are dependent on exactly what trajectory the economy takes.
Help us understand, given the fact that, of course, the risks of the mutant strains still are very much there, how are we preparing ourselves for a possible third or a fourth wave?
Well, the most important thing to recognize is the fact that irrespective of which model you use, it's extremely difficult to predict exactly how either a third wave or a fourth wave may happen, or exactly what trajectory the economy is going to take. And this is a point I keep making. The most important learning of the last 1.5 years is don't take prescriptive models too seriously. Instead, pay attention to the data. So that is an important thing that I would argue. On the health front, the most important thing is that we need to have heightened surveillance even when the cases have come down. So what we need is to keep testing, make sure when the number of cases spike up somewhere, we take action there. And of course, we have to keep the vaccination going at the background at a good clip so that, as much as possible of the population gets vaccinated. The exact same analogy can be used for the economy. We need to make sure the supply side measures keep getting done, the demand side measures of the budget get implemented. But at the same time, we should not, prejudge exactly how things may pan out. We should be open to, whether inflation or growth is the more important issue can only be known as we open things up and the rest of the world opens up and we move through time. So rather than pre-commit ourselves, I think very important we pay attention to the real data, not to what models and experts are telling us.
So while you're saying we can't pre-commit ourselves, I also have to ask you, a lot of concerns have been raised on the government's economic package as well. And I do understand that you're saying we still need to monitor data and we will be open to taking more actions. Is the government really holding fire then for a possible third wave? Because many say that even the recent announcements that have been made will do very little to really move the needle on ground.
As you know, our approach throughout has been that you have to have the economy fully open. That is the most important thing, and hence the emphasis on vaccination and on surveillance. Once we have got the health situation, in a good place, we can do opening up and unlocking the economy. Without that, nothing else matters. So that is something that we are focused on. Second thing is that we did put in place a fairly expansionary budget in February, which I mentioned earlier as well. There are strong demand side measures in there. So rather than keep announcing newer and newer measures, we need to follow through with those measures and make them stick. Meanwhile, of course, we remain open to doing new things, and we did a whole bunch of credit guarantee type things in the recent past to try and provide a sort of a safety net around that as well. Now, as I said, we have to be cognizant of the fact that while we can't be sure, inflation is an issue that we need to watch. So we will watch that. We will, there are different paths through which this economy can now proceed. So the most important thing is keep the course on the budget, keep the course on supply side measures, and as far as new things are concerned, watch the real data rather than pre-commit. Instead, watch what actually happens and respond to it quickly and firmly.
You did refer to how inflation could be a concern, and it's not just inflation, it's a trinity of issues that we're kind of dealing with. There is, of course, global rates, there is the rising dollar and inflation. Do you think the trinity could pose to be a big risk going forward?
So, as I said, it is a possibility that global inflation will be an issue. I mean, oil prices are high, but inflation has now ticked up in many, many countries, including in the US. So it could be that is the path the world economy will go down. If that is what happens, then there are some things that are good, which is that it means global demand is strong, exports are likely to be strong, even domestically demand will come back probably quite strongly. Now, under those circumstances, growth will be the lesser of our problems. Inflation will be, and we will then appropriately manage our macroeconomic policies. But it is very difficult ex ante to judge this. And it's not an India problem. It's a global problem. This debate is raging around the world. But the point is, always remember that if a certain set of problems emerge, then it means that another set of problems have probably got eased off. So we need to respond according to what is the actual path that the world economy goes down. But for now, our job is cut out. Implement the budget and the supply side measures. So we have enough to do here. And of course, on the health front, vaccinate and keep up the surveillance.
You're saying inflation, of course, could be a big problem. Do you believe, sir, that could be one of the factors that is going to keep the private sector really, that will in fact stop the private sector to put in any kind of money right now? Because globally we're seeing commodity prices on the rise. Automakers, for example, have
So if inflation is coming, that means demand is strong. So far from it, the private sector tends to like situations where prices are going up. Now, yes, for some people, the inputs go up and they may not be able to pass it on. But even the inputs are being produced by somebody, they benefit from it. So they will invest and so on. So I think you have got to choose. That's the point I keep making to you, is that you can't say everything is bleak or everything is good. In any economy, a set of problems are also a set of solutions. So if inflation comes back, if anything, it will mean that the private sector will be feeling good and be beginning to invest more aggressively and so on. Of course, that will solve one kind of problems, but it will cause another kind of problems. To provide support to the very poorest, and in the first round as well as the second round, we're directly providing food. Jandan accounts were sent, some amount of resources were sent to them. But I think trying to re-inflate the economy through large transfers of resources is probably not the most efficient way to revive growth. It may be better to do higher capex, which directly spends money as well as creates jobs, which can then have second and third order effects. So I think the balance of evidence is quite strong that capital expenditure by the government is the more efficient way to re-inflate demand, and that is basically been the stance we have had right through, whether you see the October to March period where we dramatically ramped up capital expenditure, or the budget for 21-22, which also was very much capital expenditure oriented. So our primary approach has been capital expenditure. And of course, there is the good news that exports are doing particularly well because global demand has also come back. So we have engines of growth out there. And if those engines of growth are there and we can keep, avoid further lockdowns, I'm quite confident that consumer demand will also come back.
Right. Let me also then ask you about the state of the Indian banking system. Of course, now some of those relaxations that were given by the central bank seems to be done away with. What is your assessment in terms of the way ahead for the financial system? Is there a need perhaps for more recap? And if yes, will the government be willing to provide more money for recapitalization or capital infusion for public sector banks?
So I think, if you remember, we had done a lot of cleaning up of the banking system in the years 2018 and 2019. So as a result of that, the banking system, when it came into 2020, into this COVID situation, they were reasonably, clean. They were under-leveraged, if anything. So in that situation, I think the banking system went into this crisis not heavily leveraged. And similarly, corporate balance sheets were also not very leveraged. So yes, given the scale of the shock from COVID, there might be some impact at the margin. But I think people will be surprised how well the Indian banking system have survived this particular crisis. And I think you will find a reasonably clean banking system at the end of it. So I'm not saying that there won't be any impact anywhere, but I think they will be much smaller than people fear. In fact, if anything, people are likely to be surprised that Indian banking system in a reasonable enough shape to expand, whenever momentum comes back in the economy.
Right. While we're talking about this, let me then also ask you, the government, of course, did promise a massive asset monetization program, big disinvestment program for this year, but COVID-19 did put a spanner at works. Where are we on, the asset monetization, privatization drive? We have been hearing about the privatization process for the banks as well. Where are we on that, sir?
So many of those are in process. Sadly, we lost a couple of months because of the disruptions caused by COVID, and some key officials were not able to attend office. But it's on track. We are quite serious about doing privatization and asset monetization. You will see that, you will read in papers as well that, the steps are being taken as we move forward into several of them. And so we intend to be able to sell quite a lot of assets and privatize several institutions this year. Meanwhile, some of the states have been also asset monetizing. You'll see Madhya Pradesh, for example, has done a lot of asset monetization as well. So I think the momentum in this is certainly coming back. And it's a good time to do this. I mean, equity markets are clearly been strong. You're seeing a lot of IPOs happening, which is good take-up. So this is a good time to do this sort of thing.
Okay, all right. On that note, sir, appreciate you taking your time out and speaking with us today at ET Now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.